When Evelyn died, I expected grief to take me slowly, like a tide. I thought it would creep in, small waves lapping at the edges of my days. Her absence felt first in the little things. The quiet mornings without her humming in the kitchen, the pillow that stayed cold beside me. I thought it would be silence that undid me, but it wasn't the silence. It was the voices that came after. 3 days after I scattered her ashes into the garden she loved, the one I kept alive through her final rounds of chemo, her daughters came knocking. Melissa and Claire. They didn't bring flowers. They didn't bring food or sympathy. Just a leather folder, 3 manila envelopes, and expressions carved from stone. I hadn't seen them since the funeral. They'd spoken, sure, performed grief with practiced dignity in the front row, holding hands as the minister spoke. Melissa read a poem. Claire wiped tears from her eyes like she'd spent years learning the choreography of sorrow. They hugged people, shook hands, smiled in the right places. But not with me. To me, they offered a cold nod, an obligatory touch on the arm. No warmth, no connection, just the obligatory gestures due to a man they tolerated out of social necessity. And now, here they were, barely 72 hours later, sitting at my kitchen table like accountants arriving to liquidate a failed business. Melissa spoke first. Always her. "We need to settle the estate," she said. In that clipped tone that reminded me of boardrooms and termination meetings. She'd brought her own pen, poised above a checklist. The house, the accounts, the business share. There's no reason to delay. I stared at her. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I looked down at the table where Evelyn and I used to eat breakfast. Her mug still sat in the sink behind me. Her coat still hung near the door. "It's only been a week," I finally said. Claire, ever the echo, shrugged. "And you were only married 4 years. There it was. Not even an attempt to soften the knife. Just the facts, clean and brutal. I looked at them. 2 adult women who had once called me by my first name with cautious affection, who accepted gifts at Christmas with tight smiles, who thanked me only when Evelyn was watching. 2 women I'd helped move, who I'd lent money to during their divorces, who had eaten meals at this very table without ever calling it home. Melissa leaned forward. "We've already spoken to Mother's attorney. Everything she had prior to your marriage is excluded. The house is in her name. So is the business. You were added to the accounts late. All of that is gray." "Gray?" I asked, the word bitter on my tongue. Claire nodded. "Legally speaking. Emotionally, well, that's not relevant anymore." She said it like we were discussing a car lease. Melissa pushed a folder toward me. The papers inside were crisp, already tabbed. "If you sign these, it saves everyone a lot of trouble. No court, no fighting. We're offering a clean break." I didn't move. Melissa's voice sharpened. "You're not obligated to anything, but the longer this goes, the more complicated it gets. There's no need to prolong it." Claire folded her arms. "We're not trying to be cruel. We just want what's rightfully ours." That word, ours, like I had stolen something. They didn't see the years Evelyn and I built together. They didn't see the nights I held her while she wept in pain. They didn't see the way I ran the business when her hands started to fail, the paperwork I filed, the customers I called, the deals I closed under her name because she was too proud to let anyone see her fading. They didn't see the care, the labor, the devotion. They saw meth. I opened the folder. Not out of agreement, out of shock, out of disbelief. It was all there. Asset summaries, transfer of ownership forms, bank instructions, and beneath it all, a letter written by their lawyer, a man who had the gall to address me as Mr. Halden, as though we hadn't shared a Christmas dinner together 5 years prior. Claire reached into her purse and placed a pen next to the folder. "You don't have to decide today, but sooner is better. We've already scheduled a follow-up with the notary." Melissa gave a thin smile, the kind that doesn't touch the eyes. "We just want to wrap things up while everything's still fresh." Fresh. That's what she said. Like this was some open wound they couldn't wait to suture shut and be done with. I stared at the folder. For years. That's what they kept saying. As if 4 years were a flicker, a mistake, as if it didn't count. But in those 4 years, I had built a life with Evelyn. A real one. I brought her coffee every morning. She planted the garden outside with my hands in the dirt beside hers. We opened a second location of the store together. I read to her every night when her eyes got too tired to hold a book. I was there when her voice cracked, when she couldn't hold a fork, when she forgot her mother's name but still remembered the sound of mine. Where were they? Claire had visited once during Evelyn's final month. Once. She brought a card and left before lunch. Melissa sent a fruit basket. I had held Evelyn's hand the moment the machines went quiet. But now that hand was cold in the ground. And these women, her daughters by blood, were here to make sure I remembered my place. Placeholder. A bridge. A temporary man in a permanent story they thought they owned. I stood slowly, the chair legs scraping against the tile. My hand brushed the folder, but I didn't pick it up. Melissa raised an eyebrow. Are you going to read them? I looked at her. My voice was low, barely mine. You came here as if I'm some obstacle. Some inconvenience to be cleared. Claire sighed. We're not trying to make this emotional. This is about assets. Everything is emotional, I said. You just think you're above feeling anything for me. They looked at each other. Silent. No denial. I took the pen. I didn't sign. I tapped it once on the table. You want the house? I asked. The business? The accounts? Claire nodded, her voice calm. That's the fair thing. Fair. As if fairness was theirs to define. Melissa pushed the folder closer. Let's not drag this out. You were a part of her life. But we are what's left of her legacy. Legacy. I almost laughed. The irony was acidic. They called it legacy while erasing everything Evelyn built with me. They wanted her name without her story. I stared at the papers. I thought about our wedding. Quiet. Intimate. Evelyn wore a blue dress instead of white because it was her second marriage and she thought white felt dishonest. I didn't care. She could have worn rags and I would have said yes just the same. I thought about the night she got the diagnosis. How she didn't cry until she was sure I'd heard it first. How she said, "This isn't fair to you," as if love ever asked to be fair. I thought about holding her while she vomited, while she wept, while she apologized for dying. But in the end, it wasn't the cancer that broke me. It was this moment, this room, these women, this erasure. Melissa stood, already moving toward the door. We'll give you time. Claire followed. But not too much. There's a lot to sort. They left without a hug, without a second glance, without even touching the coffee I'd brewed. I sat in the kitchen for hours after they left. The sun shifted across the tiles. The air turned thick with dusk. And there it was on the table, a pen, folder, the ledger of my worth. They had come to collect. Because to them, I was a man whose time had expired the same day Evelyn took her last breath. Michael Brooks had been my lawyer since before Evelyn. Before the business. Back when I was just a contractor with dirt under my nails and a boot print on every rung of the ladder I climbed. He was older than me by a decade. The kind of man who wore suits that looked heavy with secrets and smoked cigars like the world hadn't caught up to him yet. But he was sharp, loyal, and when I walked into his office after the visit from Evelyn's daughters, he greeted me with a look that said he already knew. They came, I said, sitting across from him. He nodded once. Of course they did. He poured 2 fingers of scotch into a glass and slid it across the desk. I didn't touch it. They brought paperwork, I said. Michael sighed, leaned back in his leather chair. They think you'll fold. I didn't answer. He opened a file, my file, and flipped through the neatly arranged documents he'd prepared back when Evelyn was still alive. Back when we were planning for the future instead of memorials. I've reviewed the documents. You're on every major account. The business was restructured when you took over management. You've got more equity in that store than both girls combined. The house was refinanced in both your names 2 years ago. You're not just protected. You're entitled. He looked up. We can win this, Michael. That was the first time he said my name that day. Like he was trying to remind me who I was. That I had a right to be angry. A right to fight. I shook my head. He blinked. You're not serious. I kept my voice even. They want a meeting. I'll go. I'll sign. Michael, he said again, slower this time. They're trying to erase you. I know. You're letting them. I met his eyes. I buried my wife last week. I'm not going to spend the next year in a courtroom arguing over square footage and line items. I don't want a judge telling me what Evelyn would have wanted. I already know. He leaned forward, both hands flat on the desk. Do you? Because I remember what she said in this office. She trusted you. She said you carried her when no one else would. That store survived because of you. Those girls, hell, she knew they'd do this. That's why we locked everything in. I nodded. And now I'm unlocking it. Michael stared at me like I was some relic from another world. You're not obligated to bleed for their comfort. No, I said quietly. But maybe this isn't about obligation anymore. He closed the file slowly. This isn't mercy. It's surrender. I looked away. You think I don't know that? He poured himself another drink. If you go through with this, they'll take everything. They won't thank you. They'll gloat. And when it's over, they'll rewrite the story. You'll be the man who stole from their mother, not the one who stayed. I stood. I'm not signing for them. I'm signing for her. He didn't follow me to the door. He just said one last thing, and it followed me into the hallway. Then do it with your eyes open, Michael. Because they're coming for the bones. The meeting was set 3 days later. Downtown Pittsburgh. A sleek glass tower with polished floors and chilled air. The kind of place where people wear grief like a designer suit. Pressed, tidy, and silent. The daughters arrived with their lawyer. A young man with too much gel in his hair and too little understanding in his eyes. He looked at me like I was already finished. Claire wore black like she was still playing the part of mourning daughter. Melissa came dressed like a CEO. Heels clicking across the marble, folders tucked under her arm like trophies. Their expressions were clean, professional. Not a trace of the girls who used to sit cross-legged on Evelyn's floor during Christmas Eve. I sat at the end of the table, alone. No lawyer, no support, just me, and silence. They didn't ask how I was, didn't speak of Evelyn. Just nods, pleasantries, and the sound of documents sliding across the table. Melissa spoke as the first set landed in front of me. These cover the transfer of the house title, the business shares, and the joint accounts. Once signed, you'll be formally removed from all associated assets. Claire added, there's also a non-contest clause. Just a formality. I picked up the pen. Melissa raised an eyebrow. No questions. I looked at her. You've already decided who I am. She flinched. Just a flicker. But it was enough. I signed the first document. Then the second. Then the third. One by one, I erased myself from the story Evelyn and I had written together. Not because I had to, because I chose to. They watched like spectators at an execution. Confident. Detached. Melissa offered a small, satisfied nod as the last signature dried. Their lawyer gathered the papers, flipping to the last section. This final section covers the disposition of remaining joint investments, he said, his tone almost bored. Just need one more signature here. He stopped. His eyes scanned the last page. Then the one before. His brow furrowed. Melissa frowned. Is something wrong? He didn't answer immediately, just kept reading and rereading. His lips moved silently, tracing legal language like it was suddenly written in another tongue. Claire leaned forward. What is it? The lawyer swallowed. This section wasn't here in the draft you sent. Melissa snapped. What are you talking about? He turned the document around, pointed to the bottom paragraph. This clause, it references a directive, signed by Evelyn, dated before her diagnosis. It activates in the event of a full property transfer. It redirects the remaining equity into a trust. Not for you. The room froze. I didn't speak. Claire reached for the papers. That can't be right. But it was. There, in Evelyn's handwriting, scanned, notarized, embedded in the final agreement, was her last decision. Buried beneath the legalese. A trust structured before her illness. Protected. Triggered by the very act they demanded from me. Their confidence faltered. Melissa's voice cracked. This can be contested. Their lawyer shook his head slowly. Not easily. Not without invalidating the agreement he just signed. And even then, she was of sound mind when she signed it. Claire's face turned white. So we get nothing? He didn't answer. I stood. Melissa looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes filled not with grief, but something else. Fear. I gathered my coat slowly. Claire's voice followed me out. You tricked us. I turned back just once. No, I said. You did. And then I walked out. Empty-handed but not defeated. Because sometimes the cleanest victories come wrapped in silence. And the ones who think they've won never hear the hinge creak until the door closes behind them. There's a kind of silence that doesn't belong in boardrooms. It creeps in through the glass, between the air vents and the polished chrome. It doesn't hum or echo. It just settles. Heavy. Final. The silence of realization. That's what filled the room after I signed. I watched it happen. Melissa leaned back in her chair, confident as ever, watching the pen in my hand like it was the final move of a game she'd already won. Claire sat beside her, legs crossed, eyes scanning her phone with the smug detachment of someone already imagining the next chapter. How to sell the house, how to liquidate the store, how to rewrite history now that the placeholder had been erased. And I was calm. The pen clicked softly in my hand as I signed the last line. A slow, deliberate motion. I could feel Michael Brooks' voice in the back of my skull. You're surrendering. And maybe I was. To them, it looked like defeat. But I'd learned long ago that not every retreat is a loss. Some are redirections. Their lawyer, a young man barely out of law school, began collecting the documents. He flipped through each page, making notes with the indifference of a man doing routine paperwork. His fingers moved quickly, efficient, until they didn't. It was subtle. His hand froze, mid-flip. Just a pause. Barely a second. Then he turned the page back. Read it again. I caught the twitch in his jaw. A blink, rapid and shallow. He leaned closer, squinting slightly at the bottom of the final page, like something was out of place. Melissa noticed. What is it? He didn't answer. He kept reading. His finger traced the paragraph again. Once, twice. Claire looked up from her phone. Is something wrong? The lawyer's eyes didn't move from the page. This clause, his voice faltered. Melissa sat up straighter. What clause? He looked at me then. Just a glance. A flick of understanding. Like a man who just realized he'd been walking through someone else's plan the entire time. He turned the document around and pointed. I don't recognize this. It's not part of the draft you sent. Claire leaned over, scanning the text. Her brow furrowed. What does it mean? The lawyer exhaled slowly. It refers to a pre-existing directive. One filed by Evelyn prior to her diagnosis. It's a contingent clause. Buried? Yes, but valid. Melissa leaned in. A directive? What kind of directive? He tapped the paper. In the event of a full relinquishment of property rights by the surviving spouse, this clause activates a transfer of liquid and real assets into a secured trust. Not for the heirs. Claire's voice sharpened. Not for us. No, he said quietly. For a beneficiary named by Evelyn. Designated independently of the will. Melissa's face drained of color. That's impossible. But it wasn't, because I watched her sign it. All of it. They never asked to review the final version. Never questioned how quickly I agreed. Their arrogance had rushed the process. And I had given them everything, every asset, every inch of what they believed they deserved, without protest. But Evelyn had left a shadow in the paperwork. A trigger. Years ago, long before the cancer, we'd sat in Michael Brooks' office discussing contingencies. She had insisted on it. In case they ever turn this into a war, she said. I want you protected. I remember that meeting clearly. Evelyn, calm but fierce. Her voice steady as she instructed Michael to write a clause that only activated under one condition. If I give it all away. A safety switch. A trapdoor. Melissa turned on me. You knew. I said nothing. Claire's eyes darted across the room. This can't be binding. She was sick. She didn't. She wasn't sick when she signed this, I said finally. It predates the diagnosis by 3 years. Their lawyer nodded. It's notarized, witnessed, legally sound. Melissa stood, her breath coming shallow now. Then it's fraud. You can't just. I didn't do anything, I said. I signed everything over, just like you asked. She slammed a hand on the table. You tricked us. No, I said quietly. You rushed. You assumed. You thought the house, the business, the money. It all defaulted to blood. Claire's voice cracked. She never told us. Would you have listened? I asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. The lawyer kept flipping through the pages, scanning, trying to find a loophole. But it was there. Paragraph 17, subclause D. One line that turned the tide. Upon voluntary and complete forfeiture by the surviving spouse, all equity shall be transferred into Trust 42M, established by the original party, for the benefit of Michael Halden, as per her written instruction. Their expressions twisted. Melissa's voice dropped. This won't stand. We'll challenge it. I nodded. You'll try. Claire leaned forward, desperate now. So what? You get it all? No, I said. I get what your mother left me. The rest you already have. They didn't understand. Not yet, because I had given them everything. The house, the store, the bank accounts, all signed over officially, irrevocably. But the moment my name disappeared from the records, Evelyn's clause took over. Because the act of surrender was the condition, not the result. Their lawyer's voice broke through the silence. This is complex. We'll need time. I stood. Take all the time you want. Melissa followed me to the door. Her voice lowered. You think this makes you clever? No, I said. It makes her loyal. Claire stayed seated, her hands trembling. She didn't trust us. No, I said again. She knew you. I left them in that glass box. Paperwork spread across the table like battlefield debris. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. But in that moment, I also felt Evelyn again. Not in memory, in action, in defense. She hadn't given me a monument. She'd given me a shield. They didn't call me after that meeting. Not Melissa. Not Claire. Not their lawyer. There were no angry voicemails. No threats in my inbox. Just silence. And I understood why. They hadn't just lost control. They had lost face. Their confidence had turned to shame, and shame is a coward's silence. They couldn't undo what they'd signed. They couldn't undo their assumption, their entitlement, or the fact that their mother had prepared for their betrayal long before the cancer came. So they went quiet. At first, I thought the silence might feel like victory, but it didn't. Felt like Evelyn was truly gone. Not just in the bed where she took her final breath. Not in the garden where I scattered her ashes. But in the final chapter of her life, closed, with no one left to argue over the punctuation. I stayed in the house for another month. I watered her plants, even though the cold was coming. I kept the heater set to her preferred temperature, 71. Always. I brewed coffee every morning, poured a second cup out of habit, and watched it go cold beside me. Her voice faded a little more each day. One night, I walked into the store, the second location we'd opened together, the one I had fought to keep alive through her treatments. I turned on the lights, listened to them flicker overhead, and walked the aisles like I was visiting a memory. The register still remembered my login. The shelves still bore her labels. Even the old radio in the back played her favorite station. A love song came on, quiet and slow, the kind she would hum to herself when she thought I wasn't listening. And that's when I made the final decision. I called the trust administrator and signed the order to dissolve everything. The assets would be liquidated, the store sold, and the funds moved into a foundation in Evelyn's name, one that would quietly support caregivers of terminal patients. Not in her daughter's names. Not in mine. Just hers. The house? I left it to them. They didn't know it yet, but I'd be gone before the paperwork reached their doorstep. Let them inherit the walls that never felt like home. Let them scrub her scent from the curtains, repaint the kitchen she designed, pretend they built something they never even maintained. I packed 2 suitcases. Just clothes and documents. No photographs. No keepsakes. I didn't need them anymore. Evelyn had already left them all behind. The train out of Pittsburgh was nearly empty. Cold sunlight spilled through the windows, fractured by raindrops. I sat alone by the window, her wedding ring in my hand. I didn't wear mine anymore. Not because I stopped being her husband, but because I had nothing left to prove. The conductor called out destinations like confessions, each town a chance to disappear a little more. I rode past them all. Eventually, I stepped off in a town I didn't know, where no one knew me. I found a small motel, cash only, the kind of place with flickering signs and quiet neighbors. And I started over. No more business meetings. No more family dinners. No more pretending that devotion guarantees loyalty. Just quiet. Just breath. It was 6 months later when I received the letter. No return address, but the handwriting was Melissa's. Precise. Angular. Inside was a single page. No greeting. No apology. Just this. Mother left you more than money. She left you the last word. I hope it was worth it. I burned it. Not out of spite, but because it deserved nothing else. Not even the space it occupied in my drawer. Claire never wrote. I heard, through someone at the bank, that the house was listed for sale 3 months after my departure. Market price. No renovations. Quick turnaround. As if they couldn't stand the walls any more than I could. I don't know what they did with the money. I don't care. Evelyn's foundation opened quietly. No fanfare. Just a website, a mission statement, and a name, the Halden Fund for Caregivers. I visit it sometimes. Not often. Just enough to remind myself that something still grows from everything I buried. Now I live simply. A rented cottage. A new job. I work with my hands again. I fix things, plumbing, wiring, carpentry. The kind of work that leaves your bones sore and your sleep dreamless. I drink my coffee alone. I don't set a second cup anymore. But I leave the mug on the shelf. Her favorite one. White ceramic chipped at the rim. I don't use it. I don't touch it. I just let it sit. Like a promise kept. Some nights, I remember that day in the lawyer's office. The way Melissa's voice cracked when she realized she'd handed me the match that lit her own paper house. I think about how little they understood Evelyn. How they mistook her silence for weakness. How they thought her love could be inherited without being earned. I remember the way Claire looked at me across that long table, her hands trembling as she realized the mother she thought she knew had chosen a man like me over blood like hers. And I remember walking away, not in triumph, but in truth. Because here's what they'll never understand. I didn't win. There was no victory, no joy, just the quiet satisfaction of not letting them rewrite the ending. Evelyn wrote it, and I honored it, even when it hurt, even when it left me alone. Because love isn't about what you gain. It's about what you carry, even after, especially after. So now I ask you, the ones still listening, was I wrong to give them what they asked for? To leave without rage, without a fight, and let them believe they'd won, only for them to open the gift and find it empty? Was I wrong to walk away with nothing, except what Evelyn left me in trust, in silence, in faith? Would you have endured it? Or would you have burned it all down just to hear them say, "You were right"? Tell me, which would you have chosen?